Yesterday was a great day in New York. Governor Cuomo signed the Child Victims Act. Under this new law, any person who was sexually abused as a child in New York now has the right to file a civil lawsuit and seek justice. This one-year window will start in 6 months from yesterday. But not all New Yorkers who were sexually abused as children will have the right to seek justice under this new law. And that's because some victims of clergy sexual abuse waived their rights and their claims through a program instituted by the Archdiocese of New York. Yesterday, I filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of victims who were fooled in participating into a program and waived rights that they had. For years, the Archdiocese of New York, which is a billion-dollar corporation, has spent millions of dollars to fight the Child Victims Act. When it became clear that this law was going to pass, Cardinal Dolan created a scheme called the Independent Reconciliation and Compensation Program, whose sole purpose, we believe and we allege, was to eliminate claims of victims before the Child Victims Act was passed and became law. Now, the very name of this program, independent, is a misnomer. This was not an independent program. My client, Emmett Caldwell, was one of the victims of clergy sexual abuse in New York who waived his rights. As an unsophisticated victim, he was no match for the Archdiocese of New York, which is, I said, a billion-dollar corporation with teams of lawyers. Just like Emmett was groomed by the priest when he was sexually abused, the Archdiocese of New York groomed victims into participating in this program. They were told it was going to be fair. Cardinal Dolan said on his website in the program that the Child Victims Act one-year window was going to be fought vigorously. They were led to believe, these victims, that they would never be able to pursue their claims and have justice. What they were told was that they would be treated fairly and there would be no cap on the settlement amounts. Well, we don't believe that's what happened. In fact, victims who participated were paid pennies on the dollar. If there was no cap, they would have been fairly compensated and the numbers would have been much different. So we filed this lawsuit to void the claims of victims who participate in this program without independent legal counsel. Now, yesterday, the Archdiocese of New York made a statement. I want to read the statement because I think it's very telling. The Archdiocese of New York said yesterday, "We require every single claimant who comes into the program to have a lawyer." And it goes on. Well, if that were true, then that would mean that the Archdiocese should have been dealing with the lawyer, not the independent victims. It can't be true that these victims had lawyers, but the Archdiocese wasn't dealing with them. The truth is that many victims, like my client, did not have a lawyer advising him on the merits of his claim and the rights he was giving up. What happened was the Archdiocese, at the end of the process, told victims to contact a lawyer they handpicked who advised them only on the language of the documents. It was part of this scheme to whitewash the process. There was no independent lawyers, and New York law is clear on this issue. A contract, like a release, may be voided where one party is taken advantage of, where you have a very sophisticated party on one hand, spending millions of dollars with lawyers, hiring an independent person who's going to hear their claims, and you bring in a victim of sexual abuse. That is not a fair playing field. And so what we hope by this lawsuit is to void these releases and let these victims truly have their day in court. Let's give everybody a chance in New York to participate in the process and have a jury determine their merits of their claims and what they're entitled to. I'll take any questions.
A little bit more detail about where the law stands on what makes you believe that you could win this and prove to that jury that people who signed off on this independent agreement, that they now can void it.
Right. So the case law in New York basically says that you look at the transaction and you look at the parties and the process. Now, whether you have two sophisticated parties negotiating a deal, the courts have said, no, that's a fair playing field. So you're essentially looking at various factors. One of them is the relative sophistication of each party. In this case, we have a sophisticated billion-dollar entity, and you have a victim of sexual abuse. On the other hand, you also have the factor of information that was provided. Now, my client was never given the file of his perpetrator, Father Kelly. My client was never advised by his own legal counsel on rights he was giving up. My client was not sophisticated in what was happening behind the scenes on the Child Victims Act. And this is an important point because we now know that the Archdiocese of New York spent millions of dollars lobbying the Child Victims Act and was very aware and had information as to what was going to happen. One interesting thing to note is Cardinal Dolan said that the Archdiocese of New York would oppose and did oppose the Child Victims Act. That's what was presented to my client. Now, just weeks ago, Cardinal Dolan made the statement that they did not oppose the one-year window in the Child Victims Act because it was treating public entities the same as private entities. Well, both things can't be true. What was the purpose of telling victims that they now supported it? And so these are the things that make the playing field uneven and unfair. And just, as I said, just like a victim of sexual abuse by a priest was groomed and seduced into participating and becoming compliant, my client feels as though he was seduced into participating in this program. I've heard from many victims in the last week and a half since the legislature voted in favor of the Child Victims Act, from victims who had settled their claims. They literally feel like they've been kicked in the gut and they've been re-victimized by the same entity who is responsible for the victimization before. And so this really is about equity. It's about fairness. The Archdiocese should allow these victims, if they want to have their day in court, to get out of these releases and participate with a fair jury, independent jury, and participate in seeking justice. I asked my client before I came out here today if there was anything he wanted me specifically to say. And he said to me, tell them honesty is the best policy. He feels the Archdiocese was not honest with him and that they misled him. And all he's asking for is fairness. Thank you.